Lieutenant James Cooper stepped off his transport ship onto the pristine deck of Galactic Alliance Station Omega-7, the weight of his M1 Garand rifle comforting against his back. The weapon's worn wooden stock and battle-tested steel stood in stark contrast to the sleek, almost antiseptic surroundings of the alien facility. His boots echoed against the polished floor as he made his way toward the weapons development section, drawing curious and sometimes dismissive glances from the station's diverse alien inhabitants. The door to the Advanced Weapons Laboratory slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a sight that made him pause. A tall, graceful figure stood at a holographic console, her iridescent scales shifting through shades of blue and green as she worked. 4 arms moved in perfect coordination across multiple interfaces, while the long, serpentine tail helped maintain her perfect balance. "You must be the human weapons specialist," she said without turning, her voice carrying harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate. "I am Weapons Master Vexera of the Cyrene Collective." She finally faced him, golden eyes narrowing as they fell on his rifle. "Though I must admit, I expected someone with more advanced expertise." James smiled, used to this reaction by now. "Lieutenant James Cooper, Earth Defense Force. And sometimes, the old ways are the best ways." Vexera's scales rippled with what he interpreted as amusement. "Surely you jest. That archaic chemical propellant weapon cannot possibly compete with modern energy armaments. The pirates we face use quantum-shifted battle plates and neural-linked shield arrays. Want to test that theory?" James patted his Garand affectionately. "I've got 150 years of proven combat effectiveness right here." "Very well." Vexera's tail swished in what seemed like irritation. "Perhaps a practical demonstration will help you understand why the Galactic Alliance has moved beyond such primitive methods. The testing range is..." The station's alert system suddenly screamed to life, red emergency lights painting the pristine walls in bloody hues. "Multiple hostile contacts detected. Pirates have breached the outer defense grid." James was already moving, muscle memory taking over as he checked his weapon and ammunition. "Looks like we'll get that demonstration sooner than expected." "This is absurd," Vexera protested, quickly arming herself with a sleek plasma rifle. "You cannot seriously intend to face quantum-armed pirates with that antique." The first explosion rocked the station before James could reply. Through the observation windows, they watched as 3 pirate vessels, their hulls covered in shifting patterns of energy, broke through the final defensive line. The ships were Ravager-class raiders, known for their advanced weapon systems and the brutality of their crews. "We need to get to the command center," Vexera said, her scales now pulsing with combat patterns. "My weapons team has prototype energy cannons that might..." Another explosion cut her off, this one much closer. The laboratory door burst inward as 4 pirates stormed through, their battle armor gleaming with active shield matrices. James noted their confident swagger, the way they barely seemed to register his presence or his weapon. Their attention was focused on Vexera and her obviously advanced plasma rifle. "The prototype weapons," their leader growled through his helmet's vocabulator. "Hand them over, and we might let you live." James watched as their shield patterns shifted and swirled, analyzing, remembering years of combat training. The pirates had positioned themselves perfectly to defend against energy weapons, their shields optimized for dispersing and reflecting plasma bolts. But there was something about the way the energy moved. "I warned you this would happen," Vexera hissed at him. "Your primitive weapon is useless against..." The crack of the M1 Garand split the air like thunder, the sound shockingly loud in the enclosed space. The pirates actually flinched, their neural interfaces overwhelmed by the unexpected sensory input. The leader's shield matrix, calibrated for energy weapons, failed to register the simple kinetic projectile until it was too late. The 30-06 round punched through his armor at center mass, and he went down hard. James was already moving, working the action as he dove for cover. Another shot, another hit. The pirates' advanced systems, designed to counter energy weapons, proved dramatically vulnerable to simple physics. Their shields, expecting to deal with plasma bolts and laser pulses, couldn't adapt quickly enough to stop copper-jacketed lead moving at supersonic velocities. Impossible, one of the remaining pirates shouted, his shield matrix fritzing as he tried to adjust its parameters. James's third shot caught him in the leg, shattering his armor's joint mechanism. Vexera stood frozen for a moment, her scales shifting through patterns James couldn't interpret. Then she seemed to shake herself out of her shock and brought her plasma rifle to bear, taking advantage of the pirates' disrupted shields to finish off the last attacker. The silence that followed seemed deafening, broken only by the continuing wail of the station's alert system and the sound of James methodically reloading his rifle. "How?" Vexera finally asked, her tail twitching with agitation. "Their shields should have. Sometimes the old ways work best," James repeated, but without any smugness. Their shields were designed to handle energy weapons, to disperse and deflect plasma and laser fire. But a simple bullet, moving too slow to trigger their advanced detection systems, too fast to stop once they finally register it. Sometimes the most primitive solution is the most effective. Vexera moved closer, her golden eyes studying him with new interest. "Perhaps," she said slowly, her scales shifting to a deep blue of contemplation. "There are things the Galactic Alliance has forgotten in its rush to advance. Things we might learn from Earth's more traditional approaches." More explosions echoed through the station, and James checked his ammunition. "Tell you what," he said with a grim smile, "help me clear these pirates out of your station, and I'll teach you everything I know about the benefits of keeping things simple." Vexera's scales rippled with what he now recognized as excitement. "A cultural exchange, then," she agreed, her tail swishing with newfound enthusiasm. "Though I suspect I am not the only one who will be learning today." Together, they moved toward the sound of battle, an unlikely pair preparing to teach the galaxy's most advanced pirates a lesson about underestimating primitive weapons and the humans who wielded them. The corridors of Station Omega-7 had become a battlefield. James and Vexera moved in tandem through the chaos, her advanced sensor arrays guiding them around major concentrations of pirate forces, while his combat experience helped them exploit tactical advantages in the station's layout. "Their main force is converging on the quantum core," Vexera reported, her scales pulsing with urgent patterns as she consulted her neural interface. "If they gain control of it, they could shut down life support," James finished, checking his ammunition. "Or worse, overload it and turn this whole station into a very expensive firework." A group of pirates rounded the corner ahead, their shield matrices humming with power. James didn't hesitate. The M1 Garen spoke twice, and 2 pirates fell before their advanced systems could even register the threat. Vexera's plasma rifle finished the rest, her shots taking advantage of the gaps James's attacks had created in their defenses. "Fascinating," she murmured as they moved past the fallen pirates. "Your projectile weapon creates microsecond vulnerabilities in their shield harmonics. The quantum field attempts to adapt but overcorrects, leaving them even more vulnerable to energy weapons." James grinned, "Almost like we make a good team." "Perhaps," Vexera admitted, her scales shifting to a thoughtful purple. "Though I still fail to understand why your people maintain such outdated technology when more advanced options are available." They reached a security station, and James took a moment to reload. "Let me ask you something. How many different ways can your plasma rifle fail?" Vexera's tail twitched. "The Mark 7 plasma accelerator has multiple redundant systems. It would take a catastrophic cascade failure of at least 7 different components to render it completely inoperable. And how many of those components can you fix in the field with basic tools?" "Well," her scales rippled with discomfort, "field repairs on quantum-based weapon systems are generally inadvisable. The risk of containment failure." James held up his gerund. "Spring breaks. Replace it. Firing pin snaps. Got spares. Stock cracks. Wrap it with tape. Simple problems, simple solutions. Sometimes the most advanced answer isn't the best answer. More explosions rocked the station, closer now. Through her neural link, Vexera accessed the security feeds. They've breached the outer defenses of the quantum core. Our security forces are holding them back, but their shield technology is proving highly resistant to our standard weapons. Then let's show them something non-standard. James reached into his combat vest and pulled out several small objects. Know what these are? Vexera studied them, her sensor arrays scanning the devices. Some kind of primitive explosive devices. Ceramic-cased fragmentation grenades. No electronics, no quantum signature, nothing for their shields to detect or counter. Just good old-fashioned physical force. Understanding dawned in her golden eyes. Their shields are calibrated for energy weapons and high-tech explosives. They would never expect. Exactly. James started moving toward the quantum core. Sometimes the best way to beat advanced technology is to go low-tech. They found the pirates besieging the core's security doors, their shields easily deflecting the defenders' energy weapons. James took in the situation with a practiced eye, noting positions and shield configurations. He pulled the pin on a grenade. "When I give the signal," he whispered to Vexera, "hit them with everything you've got." The grenade arced through the air, completely ignored by the pirates' sophisticated detection systems. It detonated in their midst, sending ceramic shrapnel in all directions. Shield matrices flickered and failed as they tried to adapt to this unexpected form of attack. "Now," James shouted, his gerund already firing. Vexera unleashed a barrage of plasma fire, her shots finding home through the pirates' disrupted defenses. The security forces, catching on quickly, switched to projectile weapons they'd previously dismissed as outdated. The pirates, their technological advantage suddenly turned against them, began to fall back. "Fall back to secondary positions," their commander ordered. "Recalibrate shields for kinetic impacts." "Too late," James muttered, dropping another pirate with a well-placed shot. "By the time they adjust for bullets, we'll hit them with energy weapons. By the time they adjust for energy weapons, we strike with physical force again," Vexera finished, her scales now pulsing with excitement. A constant cycle of adaptation and counter-adaptation. So simple, yet so effective. The remaining pirates retreated, their once impenetrable defenses now a liability. As security forces moved to secure the area, Vexera turned to James, her expression thoughtful. "I believe," she said carefully, "that I owe you an apology. I dismissed your methods as primitive, but I failed to recognize the tactical advantage of unpredictability, of maintaining options that enemies might overlook precisely because they seem outdated." James safed his weapon and smiled. "The most dangerous assumption in combat is thinking you're too advanced to learn from the past. Speaking of learning," he gestured to her plasma rifle. "Think you could teach me a bit about how that works? Might be interesting to see what happens when we really start combining old and new." Vexera's scales shifted to a bright, eager blue. "A true exchange of knowledge. Yes, I believe that could be very interesting indeed." Her tail swished with enthusiasm. "Though I must warn you, quantum harmonics can be quite complex. And I'll warn you that cleaning a gerund can take hours." James laughed. "But something tells me we'll both be better for learning each other's ways." As they made their way to the weapons lab, James couldn't help but notice how Vexera's scales kept shifting between that eager blue and a deeper, warmer color he hadn't seen before. Whatever was developing between them, professionally and perhaps personally, promised to be as unexpected as it was intriguing. The station's alert system finally fell silent, but both of them knew this was just the beginning. The pirates would be back, probably with shields modified to handle primitive weapons. But by then, James and Vexera would have something new waiting for them. A combination of human ingenuity and alien technology that would prove once and for all that true advancement meant embracing both the past and the future. The Advanced Weapons Laboratory hummed with an energy that had nothing to do with its quantum cores or plasma chambers. 2 weeks had passed since the pirate attack, and in that time, The lab had transformed into something entirely new. Where once sterile workbenches had held only energy weapons and shield matrices, now they supported an odd mixture of advanced technology and what many station residents still insisted on calling primitive weaponry. James stood at the main testing range, his trusty M1 Garand disassembled on the bench before him. Beside it lay components that would have made any Earthborn gunsmith's head spin: quantum harmonizers, microplasma cells, and crystalline power matrices. Vexera moved around him, all four arms working in concert as she scanned each piece with increasingly complex instruments. "The elegance of it," she murmured, her scales shifting through shades of deep blue fascination. Each component serves multiple purposes. The spring assists with recoil management while simultaneously acting as a heat sink. The wooden stock isn't just for comfort. It naturally insulates the user from energy feedback. "Sometimes the old-timers knew what they were doing," James replied, carefully cleaning each part with practiced precision. "They might not have had the science to explain why something worked, but they knew it did." A small crowd had gathered at the observation window, watching them work. Word had spread quickly about their successes during the pirate attack, and now representatives from a dozen different species came to observe their unprecedented collaboration. "The quantum harmonizer is ready for integration," Vexera announced, her tail swishing with excitement. "If our calculations are correct, it should allow the rifle to switch between standard kinetic rounds and plasma-enhanced projectiles without any mechanical modifications." James nodded, beginning to reassemble the weapon with careful deliberation. "And the shield-penetrating capabilities, enhanced by approximately 47%. The quantum field will actually use the target's own shields against them, creating a feedback loop that—" She stopped, her scales flickering with amusement. "And you're giving me that look again." "What look?" "The one that says I'm making things needlessly complicated." Her tail flicked playfully near his arm. "Not all of us can solve every problem by hitting it with a piece of accelerated metal, you know." "No," James agreed, clicking the last piece into place. "Sometimes you need to hit it with a piece of accelerated metal that's been enhanced by alien quantum technology." Their laughter filled the lab, drawing even more curious onlookers. The sight of a human and a siren working so closely together, sharing jokes and casual touches, was still novel enough to draw attention. Neither of them seemed to notice or care. "Ready for the test?" James asked, lifting the modified rifle. Vexera's scales rippled with anticipation. "The targeting range is prepared. I've programmed the defense drones with the latest pirate shield configurations." She paused, then added with a hint of pride, "I've also included some theoretical improvements they might develop. Best to stay ahead of their adaptations." The test range came alive with holographic targets and actual shield matrices. James settled into position, feeling the familiar weight of the Garand combined with the subtle hum of its new modifications. Through his peripheral vision, he caught Vexera watching him intently, her scales now pulsing with a deep rose color he'd begun to notice more frequently. The first target appeared, its shields glowing with complex energy patterns. James exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report was different now. Still the sharp crack of a kinetic weapon, but underlaid with a harmonic resonance that seemed to ripple through reality itself. The round, wrapped in a quantum field of its own, struck the target's shield and passed through it as if it weren't there. "Perfect penetration," Vexera announced, her excitement evident in both her voice and the bright pulses of color racing across her scales. The shield actually tried to adapt, but the quantum harmonics confused its response protocols. It didn't know whether to defend against an energy weapon or a kinetic impact, so it failed to stop either. More targets appeared, each with increasingly complex defensive systems. James and the modified Garand dealt with them all, demonstrating a level of shield penetration that should have been impossible for any single weapon type. "The implications of this are staggering," Vexera said later, as they reviewed the test data. not just for combat applications, but for our entire approach to technological development. We've been so focused on moving forward that we forgot to look back at what we might have left behind. James set the rifle down carefully. Seems to me the real breakthrough isn't in the technology itself. It's in being willing to learn from each other, to admit that maybe no single approach has all the answers. Vexera moved closer, her tail curling around his ankle in what had become a familiar gesture. Indeed, though I must admit, some of us took longer to learn that lesson than others. Her scales shifted to that deep rose color again. I'm glad you were persistent in teaching it. Before James could respond, the station's alert system activated, not the urgent blare of an attack, but the distinct pattern that indicated incoming diplomatic vessels. The Galactic Alliance Council representatives are arriving ahead of schedule, Vexera noted, checking her neural interface. They're very interested in our progress. Think they're ready to hear that the future of warfare might involve taking a step backward to move forward. They'll have to be. Her tail tightened slightly around his ankle. Because I don't think either of us is interested in going back to working separately. The double meaning in her words hung in the air between them, adding yet another layer to their already complex partnership. Before either could address it directly, the lab's doors slid open to admit the first wave of Alliance officials. James watched as Vexera switched smoothly into her role as Senior Weapons Master, her scientific brilliance on full display as she began explaining their work. Yet he noticed her tail remained firmly wrapped around his ankle, maintaining that point of contact even as she addressed some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Looking at the modified gerund on the workbench, James smiled to himself. He'd come to the station to teach aliens about human weapons, but he'd ended up learning something far more important. Sometimes the most meaningful connections form when you're willing to embrace both the future and the past, the advanced and the primitive, the unexpected and the inevitable. The real question was, were the pirates ready for what this particular connection was about to unleash upon them? The pirate fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of angry wasps, their hulls crackling with enhanced shield technology. Station Omega-7's long-range sensors counted 30 vessels, ranging from nimble fighters to heavily armed cruisers. Through the command center's panoramic windows, James could see their shields shimmer with a new configuration, one clearly designed to counter the hybrid weapons that had proved so effective in the previous encounter. "They've been busy," he remarked, checking his modified gerund one final time. The weapon hummed with quiet power, its quantum harmonizers perfectly tuned to Vexera's specifications. "As have we," Vexera replied, her scales shifting through combat patterns. All four of her arms carried weapons that represented their collaborative work. Plasma rifles with mechanical backup systems, shield generators that combined quantum fields with physical barriers, and targeting systems that merged advanced AI with human intuition. The station's defense force had undergone a transformation as well. Under James and Vexera's guidance, they'd learned to combine traditional combat tactics with advanced technology. Each soldier now carried both energy weapons and kinetic firearms, trained to switch between them seamlessly as battlefield conditions demanded. "Multiple breach attempts detected," the station's AI announced. "They're using some form of modified quantum tunneling technology." James nodded grimly. "They're not just here for revenge. They want our research. They shall not have it." Vexera's voice carried both determination and something more personal. Her tail brushed against James's arm as she added, "I will not let them destroy what we've built here." The first explosion rocked the station, but this time they were ready. As pirates poured through their breach points, they found none of the easy targets they'd expected. Instead, they faced defenders who seemed to switch combat styles at random, making it impossible for their adaptive shields to establish effective countermeasures. James and Vexera moved together through the chaos, their months of partnership evident in every coordinated action. When the pirates adjusted their shields for energy weapons, James's gerund spoke with devastating effect. When they recalibrated for kinetic impacts, Vexera's plasma rifles found their marks. And when they tried to split the difference, they faced hybrid ammunition that their shields couldn't begin to categorize. "Push them back towards Section C," James called out, dropping another pirate with a quantum-enhanced round. Vexera's got a surprise waiting for them. The defending forces executed a fighting retreat, drawing the pirates toward a seemingly vulnerable section of the station. The raiders, confident in their superior numbers and enhanced technology, pressed forward eagerly. "Now," Vexera commanded, activating her neural interface. The corridor's quantum field generators powered up, but not with the standard defensive screens the pirates had expected. Instead, they created a localized field that combined principles from Earth's primitive radio jamming with advanced quantum disruption. Shields failed, neural links went dark, and the pirates suddenly found themselves fighting blind. "Beautiful," James breathed, watching the trap unfold. "Simple and advanced working together, just like we planned." Vexera's scales rippled with pleasure at the compliment, even as she continued coordinating the defense forces through her partially mechanical backup communication system, another innovation born from their collaboration. The tide of battle shifted decisively. Without their technological advantages, the pirates found themselves facing opponents who were equally comfortable with both advanced energy weapons and simple kinetic firearms. The raiders' rigid combat doctrine, so dependent on their superior shields, proved to be their undoing against forces trained in hybrid warfare. Vexera stepped forward, her formal presentation scales catching the light. "If I may, Chancellor, that success stems directly from the core philosophy that Lieutenant Cooper helped us recognize. True advancement doesn't mean abandoning the past, but learning from it. Every species carries generations of hard-won wisdom in their traditional methods. When we combine that wisdom with new technology, we achieve something greater than either could be alone." Her tail brushed against James's arm as she spoke, a gesture that no longer raised eyebrows among the council. Their relationship had become something of a symbol itself, proof that different approaches could not only work together, but make each other stronger. "Which brings us to the matter at hand," the Chancellor said. "The Council has unanimously voted to establish a permanent hybrid technologies division within the Alliance military structure. Lieutenant Cooper, Weapons Master Vexera, we would like you to lead it." James straightened. "It would be an honor, Chancellor. Though I hope you'll understand if we insist on maintaining our unconventional approach to problem-solving." Amused ripples passed through the Council. They'd all heard stories about the training methods at Omega-7. Advanced energy weapon specialists learning to maintain mechanical firearms, traditional warriors practicing with quantum targeting systems, and everyone being taught to think beyond their technological comfort zones. "We would expect nothing less," the Chancellor replied. "Your unconventional methods have proven most effective. Speaking of which," he gestured to an aide, who brought forward 2 small boxes. "These are for you both." Inside each box lay what appeared to be primitive metal rings, their surfaces etched with intricate patterns. But as James lifted them, he felt the subtle hum of quantum engineering. "The first of their kind," the Chancellor explained. "Quantum-enhanced bonding bands, created using your hybrid technology principles. They maintain a low-level harmonic connection between wearers while remaining simple enough to be repaired with basic tools." His mandibles clicked in what passed for a diplomatic smile. "We thought you might find them personally useful." Vexera's scales flushed that deep rose color that James had come to treasure, while her tail coiled around his waist in an unmistakably possessive gesture. "Chancellor," she said, her voice carrying harmonics of joy, "your timing is impeccable." The ceremony that followed blended traditions from a dozen worlds. James wore his dress uniform, while Vexera's scales shifted through ceremonial patterns passed down through generations of her people. The rings, when exchanged, hummed with quantum resonance while maintaining the solid reassurance of simple metal bands. Their vows, spoken in multiple languages, emphasized the strength found in unity while respecting differences. Later, at the celebration in Omega-7's newly expanded hybrid weapons lab, James found a quiet moment with his wife. The quantum harmonic connection of their rings let him feel the contentment radiating from her scales, adding a new dimension to their already deep bond. "Did you ever imagine," he asked, running a finger along her luminescent patterns, "when you first mocked my primitive rifle, that we'd end up here?" Vexera's tail tightened around him playfully. "I believe I was thinking more about proper weapon maintenance schedules than romance." Though I must admit, her scales shifted to that particular rose shade that she now wore only for him. "Your demonstration of simple solutions to complex problems was intriguingly attractive." Simple solutions like this. James pulled her close for a kiss, ignoring the mix of cheers and shocked gasps from various species around them. Their rings hummed in harmony, bridging their biological differences with the same elegant efficiency as their hybrid weapons technology. Through the chamber's windows, they could see ships arriving from across the galaxy, carrying more students eager to learn their methods. But between the vessels, stars sparkled with ancient light, reminding them that some things, like courage, wisdom, and love, remained constant regardless of technological advancement. To the future, Vexera murmured against his lips, her scales painting patterns of joy across her skin. "And to the past that helped us build it," James completed, holding her close as their rings sang with quantum-enhanced devotion. Around them, a hybrid weapons lab hummed with possibility, its workbenches carrying everything from simple projectile weapons to advanced energy matrices. Each piece represented a lesson learned, a bridge built, a barrier broken. But more importantly, they represented hope. Hope that any gap could be bridged, any difference could be overcome, and any future could be built, as long as you were willing to learn from the past while reaching for the stars.